Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. I'm here with Jacob. We are in the studio today. Happy coffee time. It is Wednesday, the hump day. You made it halfway through. Nobody on?
Nobody on yet.
Okay, let's see what happens. I posted very late again today. I'm sorry. It is all on me. Completely forgot. Let me know if it's working. Otherwise, I'm going to think that we might be on the wrong thread. Should I come and check? Yeah?
I guess.
Nobody on?
No.
All right, that makes me think we're on the wrong thread.
I mean, we got all of the.
Oh, that's everybody's on.
But it says 0 viewers.
No, it's fine. I think everybody's on.
Oh,
Can you
right.
let us know if we're on live? It's just a bit of a curiosity. If you scroll down to the bottom of the thread, somebody will say, like, yes, you're good, or no, you're not good. Hopefully we're good. And if there's no volume, let me know. That was a great punchline on Friday night, wasn't it?
Linda said good morning, so I think we're all good.
Good morning, everybody.
So did Andrea. Okay, yeah, I think we're fine.
Okay, I think we're fine. Let me
8
know
viewers.
who's on
Okay,
so
that's
I can
better.
say good morning. Who's on?
How do I see that?
On the thread. Can't you see the thread on the right,
Only,
just like before?
Only who comments.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Linda
B.
Linda B and Linda. Don't make me pronounce that last name. I can't. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Crystal, Robin, Andrea.
Is it Linda Ann? Good morning, Linda and Linda. I say I'm not looking at the names today. Crystal. Who else did you say was on? I want to say good morning.
Briggsy.
Lisa, good morning.
Andrea.
Great to see you. I sent your order out this morning. Sorry that took so long.
Andrea.
Good morning. Andrea's in the UK. Good morning. I hope it's a good morning over there. We are getting some mild weather over here, isn't it? Or am I just sweating my somethings off? As usual. Good morning, everybody. We will keep up with the thread as we go along. We are returning to Rug Mountain over here because that worked well. I'm trying to think of what announcements I have for you because there are a lot right now. It is like nerve-wrackingly busy right now. So I just wanted to say before I forget, if you have signed up for the braiding in, the multi-strand braiding class, the elusive multi-strand, you are on the list for sure, right? Because if you booked it, you are all set. That is like 3 events away from where we are right now because January is such a busy month. So I want you to know we are working on cutting up the t-shirts, putting the kits together. The Canada kits are probably going to go out tomorrow and the others hopefully later in the week. But in the meantime, we have 2 in-person events and teaching events and the Celtic class. So I'm just thinking that the multi-strand is not until next month. So don't think that I've forgotten you. We're just doing things in order because we're still a 2-person team here. So all of that is coming up, and I promise you it will be on time. I promise you. Even if I have to send it faster at my expense. And I want to let you know that the event at the Little Rhodey Thrummers this weekend was fantastic. I wonder if you were there. There were so many nice people there. There were some new faces. It was absolutely wonderful. I felt great. You know, I love Rhode Island because that's where I grew up. I just feel great when I'm in Rhode Island and when I'm with Rhode Islanders, and it was so much fun. It went so well. If you are in a place where you would like to have this Alice Butler talk and I can get to you with a car like within 8 hours, I would love to come to your guild, to your library. This was just it was me, so it was an emotional talk, right? I choked myself up several times, which just seems to be something I can't control. It's such an intense family story, right? It's like so much. But it was beautiful, and I think it went really well. And we had tons of patterns, and it was a lot of fun. So more on that later. And I just want to say a special thank you to Patreon members who support the brand through Patreon. We need that. We appreciate that so much. And I will be sending out later tonight a second free pattern of the month to Patreon members that is an Alice Butler pattern. So you will get something gridded and a letter from me once we're done with our workday and I'm sitting on the couch again. I'll put that out tonight. So you'll get that tonight. So that'll be the second one for the month for Patreon members. Huge thank you to you. We have coming up also, just so you know, because I keep forgetting, the Celtic, designing like the Book of Kells, right? The Celtic themed class, Irish themed class, starts on Wednesday. You take it either Wednesday or I think it's Sunday night. And I was working on that all day yesterday, and I'll be working on that again today. And the content is really coming together. We're doing a little bit with like medieval bestiary, like from the actual pages of the Book of Kells and some other books of that time. And also a little bit of knot work, but done in a very easy way, right? Even if you feel like you are not good at geometry, math, drawing, it's going to work. It's going to be a lot of fun. What were you going to say?
It's Anita's birthday today.
Anita, happy birthday to you. Oh, I'm so glad. Happy birthday, Anita. Here come all the happy birthdays on the thread, right? Happy birthday, Anita. Happy birthday to you. Okay, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I was just saying to Jacob, I never got my voice back. It's copyrighted. Oh, my God. We don't have the money for that. Also coming up next Wednesday, I will be speaking and teaching at the New Canaan Historical Society. Beautiful historical society. And I will be teaching a pattern that is unique to the house. It's an original rug, not a commercial rug. Absolutely beautiful flower vase rug, but it's the most different flower vase pattern I've ever seen. That's coming up next Wednesday. So I will be there in person. I'm not sure if Jacob's going to come. We're not sure if that is going to work out, but I'll certainly be there giving a talk and then teaching. This is next Wednesday. And then the Saturday after is the date at the Hartford Public Library. Please tell me if you're local and you're able to come and hook while I'm giving the talk. It's like the romance of hooked rugs. Followed by a specific talk on the Van Gogh rugs and showing that Van Gogh exhibit, right? So we're working on those things as well. There's a lot coming up. But for today, let's go back to let's go back to Rug Mountain, right? Sounds a little bit like, remember Hushabye Mountain from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang? It's nothing like that, but I love that song.
Thank goodness.
So where should we start? Here?
Sure.
Let's start here. And we're going to come back down to the table. Let's look at what we've got. So if you didn't join us on, what was it, Jacob, last Wednesday?
I believe.
We were looking at some of these rugs. As we go through the studio, we're trying to make sense of things and put things into piles, and I have a lot of rugs here. So we started stacking them onto a table. We're deciding which ones we want to keep and display, and which ones we might want to put up on the site if someone else wants some, or some small projects wants a project, restoration. So we're looking at those rugs. We're continuing with that conversation. And have you got it trained on this one, the camera?
I sure do.
Okay. So this is an unusual rug. I'm trying to remember where I got this. It was definitely at an antique store. This is almost certainly a commercial pattern, although I can't place it because there's not a lot of information here. This is what we call a leafy scroll, right? And they are like tail to tail. So we've got 4 sets of leafy scrolls. This is a real classic pattern, goes back to the 19th century. I don't think this rug is that old. We'll look at the back in a minute. I think the reason I probably picked this rug up was because I thought that the marble cake fill was super interesting. I would think that this is maybe a 60s, 70s rug. I don't think this is a particularly old rug. Can you bring in a close-up?
I sure can.
I'm sorry.
No.
I want to look at the way the center was hooked because it really is something. So this is what the Hutchinsons, right, James and Mercedes Hutchinson called with their rugs marble cake. It's a lot of these sort of beige brown colors, right, kind of cake colors, but you see there are changes, there are striations. It's not consistent. It's still a hit or miss fill, but I think it's really well done, and it's not the same as the border or the corner fills, right, because these are only 2 color fills. So I just think in terms of technique that this rug is interesting, right? It's not in terms of design and composition the most interesting rug, by any stretch, but I think the contrast between lightening up the center like this and having these corners a little bit more controlled is interesting. And if you notice, they did use the lightest value on the edges of the leaves, right? And that's smart because it really pops the scrolls, doesn't it? I mean, it really, really does a good job of that. They put light colors into some of the little corner pieces, right? All these little jigsawed pieces here, right? Those are quite light. It's an interesting rug. And of course, the veining is all done with a bright red, and the leaves themselves are done with a pattern. And it's more than one pattern because we have this, what looks like black watch, like the sort of navy, dark green, black. But then we've got these pieces that are obviously a very different material. And there is a third material at least that has a lot of orange in it. So interesting. Let's look at the back. And this is one of the reasons I think it's a quite new rug. It is on burlap, which doesn't give us any clue because people still use burlap, and I still use burlap. This is really nice, the border, right? This is that tape, the cotton tape. This is the bias tape, whatever you call it. It's just been pulled down. The edges are not protected which begs the question, has this ever been on the floor? Because it's in like perfect condition, really. But this is beautifully done. It could be that this was done recently, right, and that it is an older rug than it looks. It's just in such good shape. It's hard to accept that it's very old. But I really like this one. I think it's very, very simple, but it's got a few things going on that we talk about all the time. And it's quite pretty. It's very sort of conservative, isn't it? In color, in design, and everything. Let's go in the opposite direction. You know what? I'm going to want to pull that rug there over too. Remember how I did those shows on rugs that were made in other places? Like this was made in Guatemala. I did that whole show about the women of Guatemala who are hooking with t-shirts that are cotton t-shirts or mixed content t-shirts, right? It's like two giraffe heads here, right? It's almost like a mola, isn't it? A little bit evocative of a mola. But this is that story, and you can look back on Coffee Time if you're interested and you don't remember the story. In Guatemala, they receive a lot of rugs that are, a lot of t-shirts and stuff from the Goodwill stores. So in general, the sort of food chain is you drop something off at Goodwill, it's put in the store, the retail store, it doesn't sell, it gets sent to a Goodwill outlet where Jacob and I went the other day and we're pulling up t-shirts like crazy. That's like the least expensive type of a Goodwill. And there's typically one per state, but not every state. It depends on population and the company, what their presence is like. So after they leave the outlet, if stuff hasn't sold, it gets shipped to other places like Guatemala. So for example, here, the women will go to the local market and pick up the t-shirts and they will rug hook with them. And yeah, they are using rug hooks that have been donated. And there is a mission like this both in Mexico and in Guatemala, but this one came from the Guatemala mission. So this is all t-shirt material that went through all of the various outlets in the U.S. and was not bought. And then it went down there, and they're able to get it very inexpensively. As you can see, if you are new to the craft, when you hook with t-shirt material and different materials, you can see, Jacob, if you can do a close-up, I don't even know if it's possible. Some of these are printed t-shirts. In general, because it's a busy pattern, most of them are solids, but like this is definitely a print, right? And this is something textured. That might not even be a t-shirt. So I think they're limited to what they can find, right? But they do such a super smashing job of coming up with original patterns. And of course, they then will bind them. Guatemala is more known for its weaving, right, than its rug hooking, obviously. So there's a lot of weaving and there's that history of weaving. So they use the material that they've woven for the bindings in the exact same way as the rug that we just saw. That was like, you know, Proma gown style contemporary rug, but really pretty, huh? And even on the back, it's really, really lush. Really contemporary rug in contrast. And it just goes to show you can do a lot of stuff. You can pop out a lot of colors. Look at how pretty the border is too. But just be careful when you have this kind of a busy composition. Just be careful about consistency because as you can imagine, with the heads coming up, right, the heads are kind of, this is almost like a mythical thing, isn't it? With like the heads coming up and then it looks like a body, wings, and legs and a tail. So maybe a bit of a hybrid. This kind of feeds into the bestiary conversation we're going to have in the Celtic class. But they're able to pull this off because it's symmetrical, right? It's the same from side to side. And color-wise, it's the same from side to side. You can imagine that if you placed the main motif, which is this character, and then you had all different crazy hit or miss colors around it, with all this stuff in the body of the motif, that could become so busy that you completely lose track of what the picture is. So you just, and the women who are working down there in Guatemala are so good at design and executing, right? They're both technical and creative. And there is a book on that. Does anybody remember what that book was? I also reviewed that book and it was really, really, really good. Let's see what we have next. Let's look at this little guy. This little guy has had it, but I don't think we've ever looked at him. Let me clean him up as we go. He's got a lot of stuff on him. This came out of the Goodwill outlet. So all in all, see, this is even cut on the corner. And this is the way that it came. I have not spent any time with this rug. So when things come out at the Goodwill outlet, they come out in a bin, like a giant, giant. How would you describe those things?
Giant bins.
Yeah, like those things where all the junk is thrown into, you know? I mean, it's awful. It's like awful. Everything's rolled up and thrown in together. So my point is, while this rug, I'm sure, was not in good shape to begin with, it did not help spending time at the Goodwill outlet. But I found it there, as I occasionally find rugs there, and they are rarely in good shape, and nor is this one. But it is a pretty rug. It is a dirty rug. It's a pretty rug. This is certainly a number 3 cut. It has a lot of staining. It has some seriously obvious loss problems. It's a lovely design. It could be an original design, and that, I guess, is the sad part. I'm not sure. I don't know, and feel free to chime in, but I'm not sure that I've ever seen, like, for example, Pearl McGowan, Garrett, whatever, commercial patterns that are cropped in this way. And it does make me wonder whether this was part of a larger rug, right? Because there's no evidence other than, well, this is a weird clue. I was going to say there's no evidence of it having had a border, right? On the side, it seems like it did, but on the top and the bottom, I don't know. It seems like it could be cut. That's the point I'm making. And sometimes, like the Pearl McGowan ethnic rugs, they are large, they are compartmentalized. It could be that. Because if we look at the sides, right, it looks like it was at one time finished a little on the side, perhaps, but not top to bottom. So this is a bit of an enigma. The border is very worrying. I think I'm going to deal with this differently. This is a huge project to stabilize this, and it's a very small rug. There is some body damage, like here, for example. There's not much, though. I have to say, it strikes me as being in horrific shape, but I think that's because of the border. Let's look at the back. Back is really bad. So let's see. Lots of this stuff. I'm not even going to pull at it. This is all stuff where the tails have been left, behind. And it's creating lumpy bumpies on the front. So that's kind of scary. There's a lot that would need to happen to stabilize this rug, but as you can see, it really is a beautiful design. This is very far gone. And if you look here, you can see that at one point somebody was sewing it. So I think somebody probably chopped it, right? Because no border at all. And then they thought, I sew. I know how to like shore things up with a running stitch. And they sewed it on a sewing machine. This is definitely a sewn stitch. And maybe it did its job for 5 minutes, but now we're back here. It's also lopped off on both of these corners. So that also is like, what happened? But I mean, it is a beautiful rug. And the things that I like about it, I mean, I like the central motif. You see there, it's very, very narrow. This is absolutely a 3 throughout. You see that there is a lot of textured wool in here and patterned wool in here, and it is exciting, particularly in this kind of rope border. We've got the Greek key kind of border, right? It's not exactly a nice geometric border at least. And then we've got this rope border with a lot of colors in it, and these are all patterned wools. If I was to take one takeaway from this rug, even in the state that it's in, I would say great idea, predominantly using solids in the body of the rug, but then going to all textures and patterns in the border. I think that works great. It creates a lot of interest. I also like this business, right, on the sides, right? And notice, I mean, there are cool things about this rug. Notice this is a straight line, and this is a straight line. And maybe if this was part of a larger commercial pattern, those were drawn. But all of this zigzaggy business, I don't know if that was part of the original pattern, but it's very cool. I'm wondering about color loss. So there's a lot of color loss. If we look side to side, I don't want to fool too much, but it's so dirty. If we look side to side, right, this is the original color scheme. Very cool what they've done with the lighter value. In this case, there's 3 values, dark, medium, and light. Here 2. But it's very cool the way that they've done this fill. It really is an excellent rug. I just don't know what to do with it. When something is this far gone, it's obviously a huge project. This would be a beautiful rug to figure out how to stabilize it and then get it framed or get it on the wall in such a way that it's safe again. Because it is like, it's like its head is hanging on by a thread at this moment. So it's a beauty, though. Now this one I remember better. I bought this one in Rhode Island, I think last year. So hang on just a second while I unroll. I love this rug. This rug I think cost maybe $85. I was real excited. It's not in good shape. I was real excited because I don't think it's a commercial pattern. I think it's an original. Just take a look at the way that this rug is executed. It really is striking. So we have like this miniature scroll motif around the edges, right? These are not really leafy scrolls, right? These are like the ones we saw with the first rug. These are more like arabesque kind of scrolls. This is a hit or miss rug. With the exception of the scroll border, this is a hit or miss rug in the center. And if you come in close, you'll see there are an astonishing amount of different materials in here. And it just sort of begs the question, like, who made this? How do they have so many different scraps, like tiny amounts? For example, this is like a rayon, right? This one is like definitely a rayon, possibly like a silk, more silky than rayon. Really like a kimono material. It's like this aubergine going into what could even be a Japanese print, the white. And then we've got this material that has gone threadbare. And this is present through a lot of the rug. But you see, we can only guess what that was. It looks like sage green and like an old rose color. This has also got to be silk or kimono material. There's quite a few. This one too. And this one definitely. There's quite a few materials in here that are what we would call like an exotic. But there's also stuff like this, which is solid, probably cotton, probably not wool. I question how much wool is in this rug. I think the brown border is mostly wool. I don't think this is wool. I think this is some kind of a crepe. This light color in here. The darker red is more, it could be a yarn or a chenille. It's very, very, very soft. It's just a really unusual rug. What I like about it is there's two things going on here. In terms of design, they drew the arabesques, right? They drew all the little miniature scrolls. They colored them out in very graphic ways. And if you come back down to me, right, like they're just filling in wacky style, different ways for each motif. And then they said, let's do a concentric hit or miss in the center. So they're literally just grabbing material, but you can see there is some thought put into it. There is a lot of contrast, right? It's not like they're going light to dark, dark to light. They're just like picking one, picking another, but it seems like they're trying to do dark light, dark, dark light for the most part, because the rows show up individually, like really prominently. So this is like, if you're new to this, it's like you start somewhere and then you just keep boxing out, 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 out. I think in this case, actually, they started at the border and boxed in. But they're going like waves, like throwing a rock on a lake, right? You get that splash of waves and it just goes, 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 goes until you get to the center and you get, it's got to be somewhere in here, right? It's got to be, it's probably this one here that's the like epicenter. And then weirdly, on the edges, they went all stripy. So it might be in the edges feel thicker. Like this is the part that feels like wool to me. This feels like pantyhose inside the scrolls. That's definitely pantyhose. But this feels thicker like wool. And we'll look at the back in a second. But they striped it out. So while they were concerned in the center with doing some like a design that came out as a really, really exciting abstract, on the edges they kept it a bit more conservative and they went with the stripies. So, and again, dark light, dark light. So this person who made this had the idea, had the design knowledge to know, I want some contrast for my design to pop. I'm going to think about dark versus light, because while it sounds like super elementary, not everybody thinks about these things, right? Not everybody has gone to art school or cares. But this person understands how important it is to put a dark next to a light and how that can make your design much more exciting. And it's funny that she went two different styles. Now, here's the back. You can see there's some issues here. And if you come in here, this looks like really lightweight cotton. So this is where the most damage is on this corner. This is on burlap for sure because we can see it. Yeah, that's like, I mean, it could be like pantyhose tights that don't stretch. It could be, or it could be more of like a gauze weight cotton, like a lawn kind of a cotton. But you get a better view on this side of, yeah, look at that. This is pantyhose. You see that stretch right here? Lots of different materials here and lots of different colors. This is a really exciting rug. And design-wise, it's not, but in execution, I think it's really exciting. So for that price, I picked this rug up because number one, um, in antique stores, you know, you usually don't pay under 100 for a rug because they're like inflated prices, whether the rug is worthy or not. And of course, they're all worthy to a certain extent. But I was very happy to find that one, and I felt that it was an original design. And the amount of color in it got me really excited. So for me, that was a no-brainer. We talk about value a lot on this show, what rugs are, what kind of value they have. And it really, in huge part, of course, is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Because we feel differently. You get a different emotional response from different people when you look at a different rug. And it's like part of it's the color, sometimes it's the subject. Everybody feels differently. And if I feel like it reminds me of something, I'm way more likely to connect to it than maybe you are if you just see a bunch of repairs that need to happen. This is one of those rugs. I think I showed this to you ages ago. This was an eBay rug for me. When I visit Judy Taylor, which I hope is sooner rather than later, she's out, I think, in Washington. This is the first rug I want to look at with her. So, you know, it's got a lot of damage, right? It's got a ton of damage. This is it's way bigger than a number 8 cut. And if you come in here, you can see the cut. Some of it might be an 8, but some of it is definitely thicker. So this could be like it looks like it's scissor cut. Look at these little pieces coming off. It's very irregular. Some of it's thin, some of it's thick. It's an absolutely beautiful rug. It has the kind of damage that has been sewn with a needle. We saw that in the last episode too. That always scares me because with that kind of focused mending, like a needle and a thread, right, that is so precise that that needle, right, the point of pressure is so intense and focused that it is now doing damage to both the loops that it touches and the backing fabric. It's not like an overall. You know, when you repair rugs now, you flip them over and you put a backing cloth on and you tend to go in diagonals. And the idea, like almost quilting, but in diagonals, the idea is that the stress, right, that you're putting with the new backing on the old rug will be distributed more evenly. But when you have a needle, wherever you stabbed that needle, that point of contact, that pressure is super, super laser focused and puts a lot of stress on both the back and the front of the rug. What I love about this is it reminds me of like, I have never been to Greece, but it reminds me of like what a mosaic would look like in some old outdoor, I don't know, amphitheater kind of a thing, like beautiful swirling center and then these kinds of tile motifs on the sides. I love this motif around the edge. Almost looks like eyes, right? It's I'm sure it's not. It's older than that, but and there's a lot of knits in here, like sweater knits. I just loved this rug. I think this was 70. I loved it for the colors. If we come into the center here, I think this is the most exciting part of it. And here you're seeing, these are not 8s. Like this, somebody cut a patterned wool, like a tweed or herringbone, whatever, check, some kind of check with scissors, without a doubt, because this is super, super, super thick. Most of the background is super thick too. And I'm thinking the person probably did that for speed. And then when they came into the smaller motifs, kind of in here and in here, looks a little bit thinner, but I believe that they were probably cutting everything with scissors. And that brings me back to the idea, I keep sort of ruminating, is this a commercial pattern or not? The things that make me think it is are the way that it's executed. Like, did they get a commercial pattern, but yet they didn't have a cutter? They weren't that sure about widths or how to actually make it. It's not impossible. As a commercial pattern, it's not super viable. I mean, it doesn't make great sense, does it, to have this kind of architectural circle here and these very unrelated patterns just hanging out on the edges. There's also problems like this motif is right on the central motif, right? And this one isn't. So no commercial pattern would have accidentally put this one like literally overlapping the. I don't know. I just don't know. And if you've seen this pattern, that would solve the problem, but I haven't. I also think it's odd that, for example, this rosette in my mind, doesn't really go together with this nature of pattern, right? Or these for that matter, right? These could also be like ceiling patterns, like plasterwork patterns, but the introduction of the rosette and the border has absolutely no relationship to any of the motifs in the center for me. So it's a big mystery, this one. Did you notice how in the background they're using this material here, which is all flippity floppity, but they ran out and they ended up doing some fly by the seat of the pants color blocking between these two sort of apricot colors. They're similar and overall it works. I think some of them were put there because of loss, right, where these crazy stitches are. But you can see that they ran out, and I shouldn't really have my hands on it because it's that kind of an age. Um, it's curious to see where they ran out because that tells us where they were working. So, and it's not consistent. So the darker kind of apricot is kind of all over the place, and they were not trying to do concentric shapes around like the last rug. They were going up and down with this background. So really thick cut, going up and down, but yet they must have stopped and started because of where they ran out. And it's hard to tell which is first, the chicken or the egg. Over here, the lighter one is just these two strands. So I would say maybe they started over here in this part and they thought they were going to be good, but by the time, because look at these little lines too. So they didn't get that corner done, and this whole area inside these scallops, that's all the lighter one. So they must have worked quite a bit in this area and thought, yeah, this is going to be fine. And then by the time they got to this part of the rug, they realized they didn't have hardly, not even close to enough material. So I think that's interesting too. This is cute in the center, isn't it? They put 4 little dots of like a rose color inside that green. That's really different. It's not badly done. It's just kind of had it, huh? Let me flip a little bit and see what we can see on the back. Oh, the back is closed. I forgot. Yeah, the back is closed. So what we see on the back are the repairs. Whoa. So it's a lot, isn't it? I mean, yeah, and the borders too. It's a lot. And you know what? And they've repaired it multiple times because this is like a thick, kind of like a twill material, and this is much, much, much thinner. Let me look at the other side too. Oh, God. All right. Yeah, and they've even run out of thread to repair it. Oh, man, poor guy, right? We said rugs were girls, though, didn't we? Well, this definitely looks like a newer repair. Somebody has been trying, like, ongoing to maintain it. And look at all the different colors of threads, the many times that people have gone into, over here is like the dark green. Then we've got like navies and blacks and browns and orange and pink. Over here, more brown. What that says to me is that this is probably a family rug. And just a guess, but for this many repairs to happen that are not like professionally done, that says to me this rug meant a lot to several people, which in my mind immediately like screams family rug. And people kept just repairing it, not non-skilled, right, sewing, hooking people, just kept repairing it as it was falling apart. Um, that's the only thing that makes sense to me because it's not a rug of a lot of value, but it feels like a rug of a lot of love. And of course, that's even better. This repair was done with yarn. So I don't know if you know anything about these rugs that we're looking at, the patterns, make sure that you tell us, even if it's later in an email. Make sure, I'm going to be real careful with this one. Make sure that you tell us, because of course, if you recognize it as whoever's pattern, I would be so interested in knowing that. Of course, I think we all would, and we'd attack it again later in the show. Let's look at this little guy. This is not a hooked rug. This is a little braided rug. So this is another beauty. I pick these up when I find them and when they're interesting because we see a lot of braided rugs out there at antique stores and markets and all that stuff. This one feels like it's all cotton and rayon, right? Really thin. You can see a little clue here. This is something that would have gone on a table or under a candle or something like that, maybe on a boudoir. It's very, very pretty. It's very, very fine. So they were braiding with tiny, tiny, tiny pieces. And it's still a rag rug because you can see the variety of the patterns happening here. Lots of color, lots of different designs. Let's look at the other side. The center is so well done, right? This is 3-strand braiding. This is traditional braiding. So this would be sewn together Maybe we'll see the stitches on the other side. Yeah. God, do we ever see the stitches on the other side? Look at all those stitches. So with this material, if you were braiding in wool, a much thicker rug, right, you would be lacing it together. And the lacing means that you are hiding the stitches with hopefully a more heavyweight or upholstery weight thread in between the strands, the thick wool strands. With something like this, you really, it would be very hard to do that. And what would be the point of doing that? These are super, super, super small, very like petite braids, and the stitches are all going to show. When the stitches are done really uniformly and really pretty, I wouldn't call this lacing at this point. I would call it like sewing it together. But it is a very pretty rug, and these are popular, of course, in like dolls' houses too. If you have a big doll's house and you're looking for a rug that's like for the dining room, this could be that kind of a rug, couldn't it? Depending on the scale of your dollhouse. But it's very, very pretty. Let me take a sip. Are there any comments?
Likely.
Sorry. Let me take 1 minute off of my mouth running. Check in the comments.
A lot of happy birthdays.
Oh, Anita. Oh, tired when my mouth runs that much.
Loving the color palette.
Sorry, Jacob was in front with me to get those close-ups, so we weren't catching live comments.
Would be nice to be able to restore the Goodwill rug, says Sharon.
Yeah, right? I know, it is, Sharon, it's a nice rug. It's got a lot of weirdness to it. And it'd be beautiful on a table or on a wall. But man, it's bad, isn't it? It's quite bad. Let me see what I got next for you. Let's look at this guy. Oh no, let's look at this guy. This guy I love. We'll give him a minute. He's just running the other room too. I'll hold this up for you for a second and then we'll bring a close-up in. I can't remember where I got this one. I'll hold it up for you. Oh, I do remember where I got this one. Also Rhode Island. In Kingston at something's, oh, you're there. If you know Rhode Island well, Route 138, that big red barn, right, where you first get off the highway and you pass it on the left if you're heading toward Newport. There's a big country store, antique store there. Begins Jeremiah's. I think it's called Jeremiah's. It's super, super pretty. I bought this on a day. I bought two the same day. I wonder if I have the other one in here to show next. I'll see if I can figure that out. I bought two on the same day, and I almost didn't buy them because, and this is not like I'm not talking trash about any establishment ever, but I noticed in a different stall that was not that far away from here, from this one, there was a rug with a lot of moths actively in it. Like it was like a horror, it was a scene from a horror movie. They were just swarming. So I was nervous about buying a rug that was like situated like across the room from it because I was afraid that there might be some in here. So I bought this and the other rug that I believe were done by the same person, probably, I want to say 80s, 1980s. And I left them and I rolled them up in bags and I put them in the garage for like a long time, like a year. And I kind of forgot about them in the meantime, but I was worried about that, as you should be, right? When you know that there's the chance that there's moths around because they will infest everything. I love this rug. This is one of my favorite rugs that I have. I'll never part with this rug. So this is almost certainly a commercial design, and it's not a particularly great one if you look at it. It's reversed, right? It's the open rows with kind of the more budded rows, open rows, budded rows. So, and the same leaf configuration and the same swirl. It's very musical looking to me. And I think the reason for that is the confetti background, right? So if you're new to hooking, confetti means that in a background, right? We talked about marble cake background already. There's different kinds of fills that you can put in a background, like a hit or miss background. A marble cake is a kind of a hit or miss. This is confetti, and this is also a kind of a hit or miss. And in this case, the maker knew that they had these lush roses and these beautiful, beautiful colors. Really raspberry, sangria with pistachio leaves and Kelly green leaves, a lot of warms, a lot of cools, some patterns. But in the background, they must have known they were using gray, right? And maybe they thought, God, it's such a pretty rug, except do I want that much gray in my pretty rug? And however it evolved, the person decided that they would do a confetti fill. So they did the gray, but every now and then they insert just a little, like Charles Lindbergh just landed, right? It's like ticker tape parade right down the avenue. A little bit of so many colors, very random, right? Placement very random, but you can see how much it lifts that background. And while it could be, can you imagine without the confetti? I would say this is quite a boring rug, but with the confetti, this is now, even though I'm sure it's a commercial pattern, one of my favorite rugs that I have out of like hundreds. So I absolutely love this. This is what brought me to it. Also, black border. We always say, as much as we think black is a color that we see all the time, we don't see it all the time. I'm very happy that that's a black border and not a khaki or brown border because it wouldn't pop as well. That's what makes me think it's an 80s rug, but I could be very wrong there. This is definitely on burlap still. There is some loss. It could be, you know how everything is like cycles, right? Everything is cyclic. So we say every 30 years the pendulum swings and we're back in the same place. So in the 1920s, people dressed like flappers. The colors were Art Deco. Again, in the 1950s, we went back to pastel colors at drive-ins, right? At cinemas, and then 30 years later in the 80s we come back to pastel colors and we have the Swatch watches and all of these bright colors, right? But a lot of pastels, a lot of pinks. So it could be that this is a 1950s rug and it's just it looks a little ahead of its time because of all these pops of brights and pastels. So there's also a lot of veining in here that's done with not solid wools, and this whole rug to me feels solid. But there are moments of loss, like this little guy here. So let's turn it around and see what we can see. There's also a lot of wear on the border, right? So I know before I even turn it around that this is going to be a turned back and sewn down border. And it is. And let's talk about that too. So some curiosities here. So the first thing that strikes me is there's a lot of tails up. These look like pre-cut pieces, don't they? But the tails, are not up, they're down. And that curious to me because if the person had the means, unless they were very, very good with the scissors, if they had the means to have the wool stripper, like the splitter, like a Bliss or a Fraser or whatever, they had already invested in the craft and they were probably being taught, but yet they weren't taught to bring the tails up to the surface. So that is a weird kind of inconsistency right off the bat. This is definitely see, all of these are down, and this is not wool. So this is not an all wool rug. There's some other bits and pieces in here. This school of finishing goes to the 1950s, right? This is the Pro McGowan original school of finishing. And what I mean by that, and I learned this from Diana O'Brien. I learned this from Diana O'Brien, Massachusetts. God, what's her brand called? Help me out if you remember. It's partly her name, Liziana, something like that, and her daughter-in-law's name because they were working on patterns together for a while. I feel like she's in Shelburne Falls, Mass. That's where she is. So that's where her brand is, and she has a store there, and she's lovely, and I love visiting with her, and I've done videos and stuff with her too. So she told me that when her mother learned how to rug hook, smack at like the beginning middle of the Pro McGowan era, they were taught to, with their burlap pattern, fold the edge over and hook through both layers so that there was nothing to sew onto the back. There was nothing to attach tape to because you had already folded it when you got to the edge and you hooked through both layers. So this is twice as thick with burlap around the edges, and it solves the problem of how do I finish my rug, but it doesn't solve the problem of how does my rug not get the crap beaten out of it every time someone trips on the edge of it. And that's exactly what happened. And then the change happened where it started to be taught differently. Let's not do this. Let's whip the edges. Let's give the edges a bit more integrity so that this doesn't happen. But this was the way that finishing was taught at that time. So now it makes me more than ever think that it's a 1950s rug and not a 1980s rug. Once you start talking through it, you put the clues together and it makes a bit more sense. That makes more sense to me because this is dated and the rug is not. So let's look at our nextie. What have we got for time, Jacob?
We are at 44 minutes.
Okay. All right, definitely time for more. Here, let me come over here. Tell me if there's any comments. I'm just seeing if I can find the other one. Let me bring out these three. We have so many. I don't want to handle them like improperly. I'm going to bring out these as I plunk them down on the table, right? Let me take one more little sip. I'm going to put these three out together. And this was a good story. But I do need my Monster Energy real fast. How's everybody doing on that thread?
Fantastic.
All right. So if you were watching me, if you were with me over May, June of last year, that's the time of the year, the first time of the year that I go to the Cape on vacation to Cape Cod. And when I go, I always go to the Wellfleet flea market because it's my favorite place ever. It's at the Wellfleet Drive-In. Big plug for them. They do a double feature still, and it's awesome. And they have an amazing snack bar with booze. So it's just a fun place to be. It's a good summer place, and it's the beginning of the season. So I always go, and when I go, my daughter Joss usually does the stalls with me because she loves finding vintage stuff. She mostly looks for jewelry and pins and stuff, and she knows I'm looking for rugs. And she moves fast because she's a child, and she's like a feral child at that. So she was ahead of me, and she found this stall with these three rugs. And I feel like they were something like 25 each, but I think we got all three of them for, I want to say 50 or 60, which is a complete steal. So all three of these rugs were in the same stall. They were not super visible, but she has that, keen child's eye. And she spotted them. There we go. So the reason I love them is because it's a trio, and I don't have three of the same rug. It makes me wonder, did somebody make three? And if they made three, is there a reason they didn't make them to match? Did they not have the ability to make them to match? This is making me wonder now, because if you look at this one versus this one, the colors are completely different, but you could see they ran out of color because the interior of these are leafy scrolls, right? These are double leafy scrolls that are intertwined, that are locked like this with berries, right? So this is very different. This is way more, this is way less feminine. I was going to say, I'm being sexist, but it's way less feminine than most of the scroll designs that we see because we are substituting like berries for huge fat flowers. So these could be put anywhere, but you can see in between the edges of the scrolls, they have run out of material and they've gone to a tweed of some sort to fill. So this one is like, remember on Sesame Street, one of these kids is doing his own thing? This is the kid that's doing his own thing because it doesn't match these two examples. But they're all definitely by the same, well, I'm not even going to say they're from the same person because it could be that it was a guild, or it could be it was a group of friends and that they were all experimenting with the same pattern. But yet, probably 5, 6, 7 decades went by, and they all turned up at the same stall. So maybe they were, in the end, at the same house.
That's a great shot.
Is that a great shot? Too bad. I wish we could do a screenshot of it. We could use it for something else.
Somebody screenshot that.
I love these. I love these because they're so, you know how I feel about Cape Cod. It's like my heart is like always there.
The chips?
Also. I love the colors, right? We've got a lot of blue and a lot of cranberry. And let's look at them. Let's look at them individually too, because they are worthy. So they each have a border. The center one has the largest border. I don't like to play favorites, but the center one is my favorite because I love cranberry with tomato. Right? That is like one of these crazy color combos that should not go together, but it does go together. And it's got this strong denim blue running through the whole rug. I love all of them. I love you both too, but I really love this one. And in the centers, the tomato is like this plaid, large scale plaid. I know you've seen it. That's like the evergreen with the tomato red, right? You know what I mean? It's like it's out there. If you shop for wool, it's out there. It's like a vintage plaid. This whole rug is that. And as a result, because they were using a plaid print that was a large scale, as the outline continues, right? It changes color all on its own, right? They don't need to change color because it moves from the orange to the navy to the evergreen. And it's just so cool. Look at the amount of color they put into the little berries. They're very graphic. These are not realistic berries. And in the center, little bits of like that light celadon green and then like the more grassy greens. Even the stems have 2 colors of green. All of the stems do. This stem has 1. So, I mean, they're just very, very different. This example, I'll move it over here because I know it's hard for you. This example is, and I'm going to show you the backs too, very, very light. It's very faded. There could be some water damage right here, here. And it's not necessarily, it could be from people's shoes. It could just be something falling on it. I'm noticing there's something here. Maybe furniture was on it, that kind of thing. Absolutely beautiful. I just love this pattern. Around the border, right? This is like a navy border, but it's more than one color in it on the first rug. On this one, it's the cranberry with this light rose pink. These look like cushion colors for sure. And the whole scroll system is set up with, this is not wool. This is definitely cotton, blue and white, some kind of blue and white, maybe a gingham, that kind of thing, very small. We'll flip this one over in a second and see what we can find out on the back. This one's a bit more sort of unified because there's less colors in it. And with the white berries, really striking. It has kind of like a mistletoe feel to it. And this one's kind of a cross between the other two because it's using those red lines, not the plaid. This one's using the solids, but it's got the white berries with the green stems. And if there is a chronology here, I would guess that this is the last one because they're running out of some of the colors. These rugs match, more or less, right? And they're running out of some of the colors in this one. I want you to notice also that the edge on all three is like a tape or twill edge that has been corded. And by corded, I mean that there is some kind of a cord, like on the edge of an upholstery cushion, something like that, and it has been wrapped, the tape has been wrapped around it and sewn down. So it's not just that this is folded. There is a little bit of piped cording in there that's probably like a fluffy cotton, like an upholstery thing, or it could be like a shoelace, right, if they're really thrifting it out. But there is something, and I can feel it inside the cord that gives it just, it shows just a little bit. Let's turn these over and see if we can see anything more. So these are number 3 cut. I should have mentioned that. We can see how these are done real well, and there is a little bit of water stuff in a few places. Of course, red is the color that will bleed the most, always. We can see what the cording looks like now, and you know, I'm sorry, well, it is, the cording's on the inside. This is more like a ticking, right? In the Friday episode on Cocktail Time, I talked about ticking because that is, finishing your rugs with ticking is one of the articles in the current issue of Atha magazine, right? We covered that on Friday. This looks more like ticking to me, right? It's a cotton with a print. It's a little bit thicker. It's more of a tape weight. Very, very carefully sewn down by hand. This is someone who knows how to sew. But this is really beautifully done. And I'm wondering if this was like an early class on the cape. I mean, I'm pretty knowledgeable about like hookers on the cape. And this is like the next evolution of, it didn't sound right, of ribbon candy hooking, is that putting all that information forward to you, hopefully this summer. But there were a lot of people teaching on the Cape, and there were some big names out there. And this looks to me like somebody had been taught or was a teacher and knew how to do it. And then in the background, you can see, while with the main motif, they are working directionally in terms of like what the motif dictates, the curves of the scrolls, the roundness of the berries. But then you hit the background, it doesn't dictate anything. And you can see that they've been very, very careful about going up and down in a geometric way, like a classic early mid-century fill. So that's the back of this one. Let me roll this up and let's move on to the next one. Are we getting to the end of the time, or are we still good?
52.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's come back over here. Let's look at my favorite. Oh, all right. Well, funny. I mean, again, this is not solid tape. This is fabric that's been cut, but it is a nice heavy weight. It's not denim. It's a nice soft, like a duck or something like that. You can see it's on burlap. That's the only thing new that I can see. I just love the color choices in here. And it's making me wonder, I'm not seeing any tails on the back, so that makes me think this person knew that the idea is to keep the tails on the front so it doesn't accidentally pull or create lumpy bumpies on the back. What I'm noticing with this one is that the background is a really heavy wool, but they have cut it thin, and it's worked. I wonder how difficult that was to hook. You know what? I don't think the background is a 3. I think the background's more like a 4. I think they probably had to go up. Because, you know, when you cut patterned wools and all of that too thin, they will fall apart in your fingers. So this is cut like a little bit wider than the rest of it, but it's very thick and it's definitely patterned, the whole thing. It's interesting. This is my favorite. This is a beauty. I didn't realize it had quite this much damage on the edge. So I'm going to roll that in. I want to remind you, especially if you didn't watch the last episode, always roll your rugs with the loops out. It puts all those loops put way too much pressure on the backing, and your backing will split on these old rugs because your backing is going to be burlap on all of these old rugs. And let's look at the back of this. Yeah, this one is really good around the edges. Don't you wonder who had these and where they had them down? Now, the sewing is so good on these. And you know what they did? I don't know if you can come in for a close-up or if you can see already. What they did is they put in the cording, which is in here. Actually, it doesn't feel like there is something there, but it's very thin. And then they sewed it, hand sewed it, right, to make it look a bit more round, right? They wanted to emphasize the roundness of it. So they sewed right along the edge of whatever they've got in there, and then they sewed a second time down to the backing. And it's really, really well done, right? They didn't do the fold-in corners. They just went straight across. It's definitely someone who knows how to sew and how to hook. And there is water damage. You can see right here because the bleeding of this maroon is hitting both the white and the background blue. This is not a tweed. This is more of like, I don't know if that's even wool. That looks very crepey to me. It's hard to tell what materials these are. These are 3 beautiful rugs though, and for that money, obviously I had to have them. It was a great find for Jocelyn. She congratulated herself for the next 2 weeks on this great find, and she deserved it. So, all right, let's see. Let's do one more. I know my butt. Don't get my butt right in it, Jacob.
I won't.
Okay. Let's see. Should we look at this guy? Let's look at I want to look at one that's a bit more interesting. Hang on. Let me find one that I really like to send us out. Or not. Maybe I'll just pick one. Let's look at this one. This is kind of a funny thing. Yeah, let's look at this one. This isn't what I was thinking at all. But let's look at this because this is very different. So this is a seat cover. And what's different about it, right, obviously is that it's hooked in yarn and not wool, right? It's probably wool yarn, but this is definitely yarn. When you hook in yarn, and you know this if you're already a hooker, it's sometimes called Nantucket style, and that's partly because of Claire Murray, because she always hooks in yarn. I have to visit with her still. If you're thinking that, I have to visit with her still, and I'm looking forward to it. I just have to plan it and do it. But until that time, we more associated hooking with yarn with Canada. And of course, whether you're hooking with yarn or with wool, it doesn't make any difference. It's all the same quality, right? Same skill set. It's all the same, right? It's just what you prefer to this day. So this is actually some kind of a cushion or a seat thing, right? And I'm not going to do too much naughtiness here, but you can see in here. Can you see in there? The nice bright colors that are in there, and that it is definitely yarn. Sneak them in there, right? And it's a commercial pattern because I can see there was text on the edges there. It's on burlap. The edge was serged or overlocked, whatever you say. Andrea, you probably say overlocked, right? On burlap, and you can see how nice and bright it is. But the curious thing about this is it looks different because it's yarn. And it's not just yarn, it's super bulky yarn. Look at how thick this yarn is. This is so faded compared to the other side. I feel like I want to take a pair of scissors and get in there now. But I must not, right? I must not. I must do it in a more sensible way. Look at how nice and bright that is, and now what's happened here. So that could be the sun, that could be fading, that could be spilling. Oh, look at this is almost off. Do I dare? I'm going to do it. Don't worry, I'm doing it carefully. Remember, I have a degree in textiles. It's okay. I'm ripping the back that needs to come off anyway. You come over here. And it still didn't do it. Hang on. Let me rip this way. All right. Yeah. It's totally threadbare. I'm not putting any stress on the piece, I promise. And the piece isn't particularly old anyway. This is probably a 1950s piece. But look at how thick the yarn is here. Isn't that amazing? That's really bulky. But coming through burlap is the loosest of the backings. Coming through burlap, that would not be difficult to do, right? That's really, really neat. I'm just looking at it, wondering if this is punched. And I'm thinking it is punched rather than hooked. It's very hard to tell, but when you're looking at the back of a punched piece, the channels, meaning like the directional flow of it, and the spaces between the yarn, are usually more kind of pattern driven and pronounced than with a hooked piece. And for me, this kind of has that. I would put my money on this being a punched piece. And remember, I'm not talking about like the Oxford punch, right? Because that would be later. I'm talking about the oh, what's it called? Do you know the one I did the demonstration of that night, and I thought I like pulled my arm out of the socket because it was a it was so hard to operate. There is the blue nose hooker is like that. I had a specific one. Oh, I'm never gonna think of the name of it. Am I? I feel like it was a woman's name. You know what I mean? The wooden shuttle punches. They're shuttle punches, like two plates of the earth that shift while you go. Like you have to really put your back into it, go like this, and it's a lot. It's a lot of physical work. That's what this looks like to me. It's an unusual piece. It's pretty. It's not a valuable piece at all. It's hand sewn. They've turned the edges under and hand sewn. The company probably overlocked it, but then the maker turned the edges in, hand sewed it definitely. They did a pretty good job. I think this is punched. I really do. Also because of the height of the pile on this side, it's really big fat loops and they're quite high, much higher than I would expect if it was hooked. And this was a really viable way of finishing a rug. And sometimes we talk about, come on, the place in Maine, right? The place in Maine that I was researching, and then I finally found the family. And oh, come on, it'll come to me. But they were making rugs commercially for like the White House, for office buildings, for huge department stores, and oh, what is wrong with me? Um, and anyway, they were using punches, and they were using the shuttle punches like this with women, right? Because women could stand and do this barely. I mean, it was like all day. They must have been like really jacked up. And the men, the guy whose company it was, I'll come back to you on this, right? Because I have a lot of information about this family. Oh, wait a minute. Remember, it was something like, it sounded like Priscilla Turner. That's it. Priscilla Turner rugs in Maine. Like somebody who had just walked off the Mayflower, but it was a made up name. Um, and the man who owned the company, the dad of the woman who I'm in touch with, who's Patricia, we're still going back and forth because there's a lot of content there, and we're trying to figure out if it's like a magazine article or a full blast book. But her dad, when he took the company over, he had the women punching like this, but he invented a standing punch that probably looked more like a modern tufting gun for the men to do. It took a bit more strength to stand there and use this thing like a machine gun, right? But he was real particular about the way that people finished punched rugs, because even for example, for the rug for the White House, I can't remember whose White House it was at that time, but it was massive. It was like a vast rug. But he was real particular about making sure that not more than one person ever worked on the same rug, because he felt that with a punch, even more than with hooking, you could tell, even though it was so similar, a person's like unique style or height or whatever of loop looks different than the next person, just a little bit, but you can tell. And he was such a stickler, his daughter said, for making sure that even on huge rugs, it was always ever one person working on them, right? Which was a thing when you're making a big one and you have a timeline. But he always noticed the difference with punching, again, over hooking, and he liked punching because of the speed, right? So we'll have to do an episode on those rugs, because I have a few Priscilla Turner rugs in this pile, and I occasionally find them. They are always really I don't want to say expected patterns, but they're always kind of floral scrolls because of the places that they were being made for. With the exception of, and this is one of the things I'm talking about the daughter, I'm talking with about the daughter Patricia. She lives in Provincetown on Cape Cod. She said that her dad, he died young and suddenly, like really young. So the company like folded fast because nobody could fill his shoes. But she said that he, as a hobby, because he had all of these great designs and he had lots of great people he was selling them to, and the company was doing well, and he was basically employing the entire town of Turner Falls. It was Turner Falls, Maine. And there, just as a side note, her neighbor growing up across the street was Patrick Dempsey, right, like the actor. So he was always like involved with this whole thing too, because this was like the only business in town, and they had food trucks outside for lunch. The dad was great with the employees and everything, but the dad in his spare time got like real creative. I mean, he invented this like tool for punching, but he got real creative and he designed a series of rugs, one rug for each town in Maine. So any town in Maine that you can name, he designed a rug for it. And that's what I'm chasing now, because I would like to see all of those rugs together. And whether they've been made or not, or it's just a pattern because he died so young, I would like to at least see all of the designs for them, and I'd like to see them all be made, even if it's like members of our group that made them. So that's one of my big chases for this year. I'm going to send her an email, actually, now that I think about it. But anyway, punching. And I bet we're at the end of the episode.
104, just about 5.
It was great seeing everybody today. Were there any more comments that I should know about?
Just talking about rugs, questions here and there.
Any questions that I didn't answer?
Repair temptations.
Repair temptations. That's the thing, isn't it? That's the thing. And you know, I think we will, Jacob. We should go through these rugs, like, you know, once we're done with this busyness of the next 2 weeks, and decide which ones we want to keep for the walls and which ones we want to like sell and pass on for other people to work on. Because these are like a huge investment for me buying, and there's more out in this big room. But we shouldn't sit on all of them, and we can't possibly display all of them. So we should figure that out. And then the question will come up: how many people are up for repair projects? Because obviously most of these rugs need some kind of repair, most of them. So that is a huge to be continued, and we will see you on Wednesday. Today's Monday, right?
Monday.
Okay, so we will see you on Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yes.
Wednesday.
Next week is New Canaan. Yes, we will see you on Wednesday.
Groovy.
We might return to this on Wednesday because I don't have time right now to work on content. Our dying month is going to spill over into February for sure, just because of the amount of busyness that we have going on here. So maybe we'll return to the pile on Wednesday, because then I don't have to do any prep for it before. You see, that's how that works. So regardless, we will see you on Wednesday for coffee time, same time, noon Eastern Standard Time. In the meantime, look at Ribbon Candy Hooking, and Patreon members, look at your email, because later tonight you will be getting a free Alice Butler pattern to celebrate this past weekend. And I will be putting some of the leftover Alice Butler patterns that didn't sell this weekend onto our main Facebook page, which is Rug Hooking and Punch Needle Club. Also, one more thing, we created a date locally for a hook-in, March. Don't let me say the number and say it wrong. Hang on. This will be in East Hampton, Massachusetts. And it's going to be at that place I was telling you about, the Creation Station, with all the beautiful lit woods around it. Lots of fun. And we went for March 11th. So that's a Saturday. And it can be overnight if you want to stay. It sleeps 10 people. We'll figure out all the details of that. But if you are local, this is like just north of Springfield, definitely worth coming to. And I'm going to give out, because it's March, I'm definitely going to have a free pattern for the people who come that has to do with March and St. Patrick's Day, but isn't super predictable and boring. So I'll figure that out later. But March 11th, if you're local, put it on your calendar, and please let me know if you're able to come on what is it, the 28th to Hartford, right, to the Talk in Hartford, because I'd love to have people in the audience who are working on hooking the 28th Hartford Public Library, the big one in the town center. We'll see you on Wednesday. Have a great afternoon. Have a great day.